Before I say anything else about our reading for today, let me emphatically make this point. Martha was not busy in the kitchen. She was not standing over the stove cooking. She was not preoccupying herself with dishes. She was not tidying up the last few things from her guest. She was not a harried housewife taking care of household chores. She did not wear an apron. Now that I've said that, let me acknowledge it with the proper ambiguity. She might not have been busy in the kitchen. The fact is that the verb used in this text, diakonia, could possibly refer to what many scholars call table service, serving food to guests, etc. In fact, the writer of Luke Acts often uses the verb in this way, but that is not its sole meaning. Diakonia simply means service, and this could mean serving food to her honored guest. And let's also give Martha her proper due. He is her guest, and it is her house work. But it could also mean any number of things. Chiefly here, diakonia is the word from which we derive deacon. It also refers to the service of ministry. And the reason I so emphatically made a point that was not entirely clear is specifically because we, as a culture, have relegated Martha to her proper womanly domestic sphere for too long. For centuries and centuries, preachers, Sunday school teachers, small group leaders, and the like have read this and assumed that because she is a woman, Martha must be busy with the housework. And so, to balance out the scales just a little bit, for the next 15 minutes, that's all, we are going to make the opposite assumption. Martha was busy as a leader of her religious community, as a proud Jewish woman hosting a young teacher she was excited to hear from, as a minister in the service of her God, as a deacon or deaconess. Please kindly banish from your mind all thoughts to the contrary until I am done speaking for today. That being said, unlike similar text in this gospel, discussion of today's reading is unfairly skewed by the fact that the two main characters are women. Whereas another reading may focus on the actions and words of those involved, seeing them as full people, the interpretations of this text are disproportionately impacted by their gender. And on one hand, thank God we have these strong women examples to learn from in this gospel. Women who learn and serve and teach the rest of us. And yet, on the other hand, what a shame that every time we see these examples, we immediately feel the need to rehash the age-old discussion. Are women fit to serve as ministers of our God? And yet here we are again. In fact, so inconsistent are the forces of misogyny in ours and many cultures that scholars have managed to argue for silencing women either way. According to some, Martha's exhortation comes from her desire not to see her sister enter the sphere of theological teaching by engaging in discussion with a man. These argue that we should remember Martha when we think of women in the church who suffer a crisis of identity upon seeing other women teach and lead. They say that her fear is the same as the fear of women in our time who don't know how to feel about themselves if women's identities become more than that of the household. And yet, other scholars tell us that Jesus' teaching to Martha, that Mary has chosen the better portion, is ultimately an approval of female silence. According to them, Jesus means to say that as a woman, Martha should stop working and going about her ministry and remember that her proper place is at the foot of a man listening. So either way, you can't win. Women are told to serve, and women should be silent, and women shouldn't teach, and women shouldn't learn. And when women do pop up in Scripture, they appear to testify to the proper place. Because God forbid a man should learn something from a woman's example. Moreover, by pitting these women against each other, by saying that one must have the better portion, focusing on the competition between women who do this and women who do that, we further stymie the place of women in our society by diverting attention from the real issues and the real teachings. And so with that, I will feel free to say that I have addressed the issue of women's roles in the church here. I've given fair say to those who read the text as approval or disapproval, and I will from here on take the equality of women and their role as leaders and ministers as a given, focusing on what they have to teach us rather than debating their right to teach us at all. As earlier, please kindly banish all other thoughts from your head, and we'll begin with the real part now. But now that we've seen to all that, here's what I see in this text. The story today comes directly following the parable of the Good Samaritan, and many scholars like to see the two as a contrast to one another. Not that Martha is the anti-Samaritan, but they're set as a pair. The Samaritan is one who suddenly, unknowingly, is moved through passion to commit one good work or several in quick succession. Martha, on the other hand, is already committed to the good work of the church, of the Jewish community, however you phrase it. Good works are already her life. She's already about the service of God's community on this earth and already labors toward it unceasingly. It is, I think, no mistake that she is one of only 2 people in this book to receive Jesus into their home. However, the devoted servanthood we see in Martha is of a different order than the radical caretaking we see in the Samaritan. Because there is a vast difference between a single good work and a life committed to caring for the other. The toll is different. I see here a warning from the writer of the gospel after Jesus told us to go and do likewise, caring for those hurting and in need in our community. The writer shows us Martha to remind us also to slow down. Because Martha is busy and distracted and consumed by her work for the kingdom. Not to say that that work is not crucial. Keep in mind that this one feast is but a sample of the work she does in her community. She is busy with much service here, but not only today, not only for Jesus' sake. Many scholars, in fact, argue that Mary and Martha together function as a pair of leaders in their community. And likely they are both fatigued day in and day out with the work that needs to be done. There are always widows and orphans to care for, always more poor to look after, always more people exhausted from living under an empire, always more people frustrated by corruption in the temple that purports to stand between them and their God. There is always so much to do, and Martha is exhausted. It is tempting to see her appeal to Jesus as one of righteous indignation, but when I look at it, I see pain and need. Martha reaches out to Jesus as a teacher and says, I need help. I'm working hard, and I need someone to lighten my load, so can you please ask her to lend a hand for just a minute, because otherwise I don't know how I can do this. To put it another way, burnout is real. When you devote your life to the service of others, it can be easy to feel like your job is to change the world. And it can be frustrating when this doesn't happen. And trust me, I am familiar with the feeling myself. Especially because, as was already acknowledged, we appear to be living in pretty difficult times. We can't go a week, a couple days without a mass shooting or a police shooting or a bombing, and we can't go one single day without reading news in some paper about another terrible thing that someone has said about God's children, whether they're queer or immigrant or women or people of color. We can't go a single day. And every time, every day, all I can think to myself is, Jesus Christ, is it so freaking hard to love other people? And yet we still can't quite seem to get there in our world. And I try. Oh my God, do I try to love harder in the face of it. And I pray that we are building a better world than this one that we are now. And so I know exactly what Martha means when she asks Jesus for help. And it is not an appeal to get her sister to do the dishes. It's a plea that someone Anyone else would work with her as she tries to make things a little better. And it is a cry that she not be left all alone trying to change the world because she is tired. And she is doing everything she can, and everything just seems to be getting harder, and the world seems to be getting worse. When I think of all of the good activists and social justice warrior people I know, the ones who are like Martha in our times as she was in hers, I see a clear distinction between those who take after this exhausted, burnt-out Martha and those who do not. My friends and I will often phrase it like this: how can someone be so dedicated to justice for humanity and so awful to the people that they see in their daily lives? And this happens, trust me. You would think that when you spend all day talking about human rights, you would know how not to treat your employees and your friends like garbage. And unfortunately, not everyone does. And these people, they are some of the most dedicated people I know. And they care so much, but they are so clearly exhausted. And the fight has gotten to them so much, and they don't feel like they can deal with any of the people around them because they are still so busy trying to deal with all of the people in the world. They are, as Martha, trying to take responsibility for fixing every injustice, and in doing so, in their cry for help, they lash out against their partners in ministry and service and in action. But for others, for some out there, you can so clearly see the love that radiates from them and touches everyone they come into contact with. Their work instead becomes an outcropping of this love that they have in their daily life. And you can perceive it so clearly, their joy at the people that they are privileged to get to know and talk to and love. And sometimes that love looks very angry. And often it is very angry, but there is never any mistaking that it is love all the same. And these people too, they seem to have some gift at not getting exhausted in the same way. They see the swells of injustice and pain break over and over, but find a way to deal with it, bearing such grace and love and forbearance. And it seems the difference is this: they remember to take a good look at the people around them and remind themselves why it is they do what they do. And this is why Jesus' words to Martha here are crucial. Some see them as a reprimand, some would say he's taking Mary's side, but I think instead he's telling Martha to take a break, to sit with another person, to remember the love that sparks our action in the first place. In contemporary circles, it's fashionable to speak of self-care, and usually by this people mean bubble baths and Netflix binging and ice cream and knitting. Not that I have a problem with any of those things, but that's the fashion. How crucial, though, how important when energizing ourselves for the good work of God's community, to take time to remember to care for ourselves by remembering the love for one another that compels us to our work, the encounter with one another, to take time and sit and listen to one another's stories and see the beauty and divinity in each other. How important Jesus' words here to Martha, busy and exhausted Martha, Martha pleading for some help in her good works, how important his reminder to her to take time to stop working so hard and to sit, to be with other people, listening, engaging, and loving. It is this, in the end, that strengthens us to do the important work. It is this that reminds us why the work is important. And it is this that enables us to do the work well, to not feel distracted or overwhelmed or exhausted and world-weary, but to revel in the love for one another that is as easy as breathing, and to remember that we have to inhale that love before we can exhale it. Thank you.